you're probably losing way more games of Flesh and Blood than you should be. Today I'm going to talk about some of the basics in Flesh and Blood, some common mistakes, and how to fix them. I just tried to film this video, and I did it very fast and scripted, and I didn't really like it. If you want a really fast, nice, scripted video, Sloopdroop already has a pretty great video covering almost exactly the same things I was covering, which is using your armor too much, using your weapon, or using turn zero, like taking too much damage, stuff like that. So today I'm going to take it a little more podcast style, which I think is better for how I film it anyways. And we're going to talk about just some of the basics. It's going to be a bit longer of a video, and just sit back, relax, and I'm going to talk to you about some things in Flesh and Blood that are really important to know, and it are some of the most important things that take me really farther. One of the reasons I'm, top 10 in the US in Limited, and do pretty good in Classic Constructed. It's just understanding the basics in Flesh and Blood. Like, getting the basics is going to win you so many more games than just practicing over and over. Like, practicing over and over is great, and you should definitely do that. But if you don't understand like the basics of Flesh and Blood and how you should be doing it, you're just going to end up losing some games. So I've got a bunch of random cards here in front of me, and I'm going to talk through, at first, the points of value system, right? So I've got this foil Deathly Whale that the camera's not going to focus on. But this card is really good at doing two things and really bad at doing one thing. So most cards in Flesh and Blood that you're going to put in a deck that are good enough to put in a deck are going to do one of three things, like all cards in Flesh and Blood. They're going to pitch, so this Deathly Whale pitches for 3. They're going to block, this card blocks for 3, even if you can't see it. And they're going to attack, so this card attacks for 4. So it's doing two things really well here. Pitching for 3 is already pretty good. You're getting 3 value from the card, right? I talk about points of value a lot. Value is just one resource, 1 life, 1 block, 1 power is getting value, and you want to get at least 3 from every card. So pitching a card for 3, if you're going to use all 3 of those resources, is pretty good, right? If you're wasting some of them, not as good, but pitching for 3 is good. Just as well, blocking for 3 is pretty good if you're actually blocking for 3. If you're blocking a Kodachi with your 3 block, that's not really good. But if you're blocking 3 full damage with it, at least, you're getting good value from it. Now, attacking here for 4 is not good. The reason for that is not because 4 is not a good number. The reason is because you have to pitch 3 to play this card normally, right? Obviously, let's ignore the text that's on this card. But you have to pitch 3. It costs 3 to attack for 4. So that's actually taking 2 cards. You're taking the card itself, and you're taking the card you're pitching. So you're only getting 2 damage per card, right? This card plus the 3 resources you had to pitch for it is 2 cards for 4 damage. That's 2 damage per card, which is quite bad, right? We don't want to get 2 damage per card. Even this card is pretty bad if you're just pitching and you're not using the other resources, right? So this costs 1, and it attacks for 4, right? 1 for 4 is fine, but it's not good if you're not using those other 2 resources, right? If you're pitching a blue for it. If you're pitching a red for it and you're attacking for 4, once again, that's 2 cards for 4 damage, which is not great. Let's find a card. This is a card that's pretty good if we once again ignore the text box. This is Vantum Banshee. This attacks for 7 and costs 3, right? So when you play this card, if you're pitching blue to attack for 7, you're getting about 3.5 value per card, right? Pitch card, this card, 2 cards for 7, 3.5 value per card. That's pretty good. We're trying to get at least 4 for most cards. Some cards can get a lot more, right? If we look at Rain Razors here, Rain Razors can sometimes do nothing, right? You can play it, it costs 0, and it gives your arrows +2 while attacking. If you don't use any arrows that turn, it does nothing. But if you can set this card up right, if you can shoot 3 arrows, which Lexi can do, she can arsenal an arrow, she can then Voltaire twice, meaning she's going to shoot 3 arrows this turn. This costs 0, and it gave you +6 that turn, which is 6 value from 1 card. It's one of the reasons this is the strongest card, or one of the strongest cards in Lexi's deck, right? 1 card for 6 is really, really, really strong, and just a fantastic rate, right? Let's find another card here that is a pretty good rate. I want to find a 0-cost card that's pretty good. So we looked at a 3 for 7. That's pretty good. 3 for 8 is ideal because we're trying to get at least 4 value for most cards. But if you can get 3, that's fine. Pitching for 3 or blocking for 3 is fine for most cards. Pulse of Voltaven. I don't know why I have a bunch of Lexi cards here. It's a 0 cost, and it gives your next lightning, ice, or elemental attack this turn, +4. That's great. +4, this card costs 0 is good. And if you're ever using a card that costs 1 or 2, that's totally fine as long as you're using the other resources, right? So if you're attacking with the card I showed that's a 1 for 4, you need to be getting, 3 value from those other 2 resources, right? Because then you're getting 2 cards for 7. So if you, I don't know, somehow get 3 damage out of the other 2 resources, it doesn't matter what card you play. Let's say you play Earthlore Surge. That's a Briar card that costs 2, and the red gives +5, right? Then we're doing +5 with those 2 resources, and then 4 with the other 1 resource. So we're dealing 9 damage, and we use 3 cards, right? The Pitch, that's blue, the Earthlore Surge, and the 1 for 4. So 3 cards for 9 is 3 value from each card. Not amazing, but that's like the bare minimum we're trying to hit is 3 value from each card. If the 1 cost attack was for 5 or even 6, then we're getting 3 cards for 11, which is a lot closer to almost, ideal, right? Because then we're getting a really good value there. So it's important in Flesh and Blood to try to really shoot for 4 value from every card. Anything higher than that's amazing. I talked about Rain Razors getting 6 value just by itself, which is why that card's so good. But that's one of the kind of basics in Flesh and Blood and what you want to try to hit, right? Now, some of the most common mistakes I see is based on turn 0, right? So we call the very first turn of the game, the very, very first turn 0. You start at 0, and we kind of call it that because you actually draw up both of you at the end of that turn. So if you've played any games of Flesh and Blood, you know that on the very, very first turn of the game, both players draw up to 4 instead of just the player whose turn it is, right? Because of that, you can't really deal any damage that turn, right? If your opponent is experienced at all, they're going to know you should be blocking on that turn. There's no reason to give your opponent free damage. It doesn't matter how amazing your cards are. You're going to get new ones. There's no point in giving them free health damage. It's just silly, to be honest. It's a common new player mistake I see is not blocking on the very first turn. You shouldn't take any damage. You just should not be taking any damage on the first turn. You're making a major mistake if you are. There's a few exceptions to that. Like, for example, if you're playing Lexi, you're going to want to activate Voltaire and put an arrow in your arsenal, and maybe it's worth taking a few points of damage to do that. But generally, you shouldn't be taking any damage. If they're a ninja, they're attacking with 2 Kodachis, you might want to have to take 1 of them just so you have enough cards to block with everything, but really you should not take any damage on the first turn. And as the attacking player, you should only be attacking on the first turn if you're going to get something out of it. If you're playing a dominate attack, you're going to probably get some guaranteed damage in. If you have permanence, that's really what you should focus on. If you have Grasp of the Arknight, like a Rune Blade, you should be activating that to make rune chants. You should be playing items. You should be playing auras. Warmonger's Diplomacy is a great turn 0 play, but generally no damage should happen if both players are playing correctly on the first turn. And that is why a lot of people don't know this, especially new players. The best option for almost all heroes is to go second. Going second means when you attack, your opponent has to either block and lose cards on their turn because they're not going to draw up, or take the damage, right? So you're actually gaining advantage when you're going second. There's not really any advantage outside of permanence for going first. Like I said, there's exceptions. Icelander wants to go first. Dash wants to go first. There's a few heroes that are okay with it. But generally, it's just much better to go second. I play a lot of Bravo. Bravo wants to go second. Lexi. Lexi wants to go second. She's a very popular deck right now. Basically, every aggro deck, Rune Blaze, Ninjas, wants to go second. Going second is just much better. You get the tempo. Tempo meaning you are going to be the first person to take cards permanently from your opponent's hand. They don't get to draw those back up at the end of that same turn, right? So going second generally is better. And then I see people use equipment like way too willy-nilly. Like I said, I'm kind of doing a long version of what some shorter videos already exist, but equipment is really important in Flesh and Blood, and you should not be just throwing it out there. Like, you only have 4 or maybe 5 pieces if you have an offhand, and it's valuable. Like, there's only things you should be blocking with are on hits. Snatch is a great on hit to block with it. Crippling Crush, like dominated cards, you need to save it for. So if you're playing against Bravo, you should save it for their dominated attacks. But even then, you should just be conservative with it, right? If you don't need the 2 cards in your hand that you could block Snatch with on your turn. It's probably better still to save that equipment and just block with the 2 cards on Snatch. Obviously, this is really dependent on decks. I mean, it's often better to do 1 card and then a 1 block equipment on Snatch, but it's you just want to save that equipment. If you have equipment, I've won so many games with all of my equipment or a lot of my equipment left over, and that means I was just playing it right. Like I was being conservative with my equipment. If you die with equipment left over, obviously you're making a mistake, but if you win with equipment left over, that means you were probably blocking in an efficient way. Maybe sometimes you were too conservative if you have equipment left over still, but it's not a problem. And equipment is just super valuable resource. So the more you play, they'll understand that. But don't block raw damage. If they're just attacking you with Anathos, if they're attacking you with anything, a head jab that has no on hit, you should not be using your equipment unless that card's going to kill you when it hits. So unless the on hit is like really good, like draw card or death, you shouldn't be using your equipment to block these cards. So equipment's a valuable resource. And then I think the third really common mistake is just not utilizing your weapon enough. Weapons are probably one of the strongest things in Flesh and Blood, and they really help you play around fatigue. Fatigue is a super common strategy in Flesh and Blood. If you could run your opponent out of cards, or what a lot of people don't realize is fatigue in Flesh and Blood is mostly running your opponent out of power cards. So if they're out of their red cards, if they're only on their good blue cards, or their bad blue cards, I should say, you still win. Like if you have strong red cards left, and they have just their pitch cards, you're usually going to win that game. So fatigue isn't just your opponent goes to 0 cards. Your opponent could have 20 cards left in deck. If those 20 cards are all blue cards that they're not going to be able to kill you with, you've still won the game from that point. So running out of your powerful red cards is really what being fatigued in Flesh and Blood is, and you should be playing around that, right? So if you think the game's going to go that long, where a lot of games do. So for example, if you're playing Briar, you've played a Nimblism into Ravenous Rabble, so you've attacked for 7 go again, and now your Rosetta Thorn is activated. Your last card in hand is an Exude Confidence, right? And you have something in Arsenal, I don't care what it is. So you're not going to be arsenaling this Exude Confidence. The options are attack with the Exude Confidence for 4, or pitch the Exude Confidence to attack with Rosetta Thorn for 2 physical and 2 arcane, so 4 again. There's some arguments to attack with the Exude Confidence. The main one, or almost the only one, is if you don't have your Embodiment of Earth yet and you really need it. But generally, it's much better to pitch that Exude Confidence to attack with the Rosetta Thorn, right? It feels weird to pitch a red card just to deal 4 damage, but that's still 1 card for 4 damage. It's just being converted into the weapon, and you get to save that powerful red card for later when you draw it on your second cycle. So it's important to remember these things. Your weapons are really strong in Flesh and Blood. Most weapons should be, at least, especially ones that are being played in Classic Constructed. You should be pitching regularly into these cards to get value from them. But I think that's mostly what I've got today. I really appreciate you coming by and watching. If you like my style of videos that are a little more relaxed and just kind of talking about Flesh and Blood, please leave a like or comment, subscribe. I probably should just start doing a podcast or something like that. I'm not the type to do the really highly edited stuff. I think that content's amazing. Like I said, Sloopdroop, I think, is the name of the channel, and he's fantastic. So check that stuff out if you want some really fast, like 4 or 5 minute, super edited videos. Those are great. I just don't have the talent or skill or ability to do that, and I still want to express and create strategy content anyways. So hopefully you enjoy these types of videos. If you want to support me, I have a Patreon. I put a lot of deck lists on the Patreon. I have a list of almost every hero's deck list. You can see them regularly updated whenever I'm playing them. I update the list and you can see that. So if you want to ask any questions, I have a lot of my Patreons DM me or message me on the Patreon Discord for any questions for their decks or just general strategy content. That's what you get for supporting me. I really appreciate the support. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.